So good afternoon and good late afternoon for our other locations. My name is Marcy Daniel. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at PowerSchool, and I'm really excited to moderate a panel today that includes a number of executive women leaders across California and New York. So I'm going to introduce them and then we'll jump right into it. So the first one is Pam Gibbs. She's the Director of Government Relations for Los Angeles County Office of Education. She successfully led advocacy efforts to improve funding and programs for the state's incarcerated youth and has worked with state's education leaders to improve education opportunities for all of California's children. So Pam, thanks for being here. Amy McIntosh, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor of City University in New York. She is a PowerSchool board member and was nominated by President Obama to be Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, overseeing policy, budget, and research offices. She shaped education policy and new initiatives to improve student life outcomes for pre-K through college. She is passionate about improving equity of education and economic opportunity. Thanks for being here, Amy.
Thank you, Marcy.
And then Carolyn Peer, the CEO of Humaxa. I knew I was going to get that wrong. Apologies. Carolyn is an award-winning human capital management industry leader and founder with a background in cognition, neuroscience, and instructional technology. She helps organizations get to the root of what drives employee retention, sharing her expertise in the HCM industry, cognition and neuroscience, AI, and instructional technology to help employers retain their most valuable assets, their people. And finally, but not least, Anita Ross. Anita is a speaker, life coach, and author of Meantime Love, A Woman's Journey from Self-Loathe to Self-Love. She's on a mission to empower millions of women to love themselves fully and to equip them with the tools for living the life of their dreams. And this is the book that she has written, and she does a lot of workshops in the area. If you're interested in learning more about that, we can provide that after. So, standing room only, which is fantastic to see, PowerSchool. There's a few seats up front. So I'm going to kick us off with a broad question, which is, can you tell us a bit more in your organizations how you make the case for diversity in your organization? And we're going to start with Pamela with this question.
Thank you very much, Marcy. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Wonderful. One of the things that we do at our office is we advocate on behalf of all of the state's children, including Los Angeles County Office of Education. As you can imagine, many school districts have a common theme. And so when we're advocating, what we want to do is reach out to Republicans, Democrats, men, women, young people, older people. That's our mission. So the case for diversity in our office is that we reach out to the Women's Caucus, that we're speaking their language. Over the last several years, the Legislative Women's Caucus has grown their numbers, and they have been extremely impactful. Nearly 100% of their legislative priorities get signed into law. So when you talk about, well, what voice do we need to have when we're trying to speak to the Women's Caucus? What does my staff have to say? Which women on my staff can have input in the messages that we're delivering, or what are they experiencing? So that's a case for having diversity in our office and our organization more specifically.
Great. And I'll follow on that when we started Humaxa, we used to rib each other a little bit because we would talk about how diverse our team was, how we had a man, a woman, a Latino, a Caucasian, a millennial, a Gen Xer, someone who's neurodiverse, somebody who speaks Portuguese, Spanish, someone who speaks French, Japanese. Oh, and by the way, there were only two people. So we still kind of joke. I mean, we're larger now. We still joke about it, but I truly, honestly believe we would have never gotten to the place we are today without having such a diverse team. And of course, as we've grown, we've, continued to consider that and very intentionally build the team to be very diverse. I can't tell you how many times from a product standpoint, we've sat there trying to figure out something and I've made a suggestion and my male millennial co-founder says, you're out of touch, Carolyn. You need to talk to the millennial here. That's me. And has given a completely different perspective from a product standpoint. There's no way we could have ever gotten that without having such a diverse team. So it is definitely a strategic advantage for us at Humaxa.
Thank you, Carolyn. I think one of the key things as you think about diversity in your organization is what are some of the strategies that you can do to drive against that? And I know, Amy, you have some experience in this area.
Yes, so thank you. Hello, everyone. Couple of thoughts about strategies for recruiting and maybe a little bit for retaining a diverse team. I'm currently at the City University of New York, but I also have 20 years in the private sector. And it's absolutely imperative in recruiting a diverse team to have a diverse slate of candidates. You have to work somewhat hard at times to find a diverse slate. But then when you do that, and if you're a leader in an organization, you have to insist that every hiring manager starts with a diverse slate and moves through the process with diverse candidates up until the finalists. And if you do that very intentionally, and I've been in very large organizations like Bell Atlantic and American Express, you will improve the diversity of your team. In terms of retention, this is where I have a lot of faith in affinity groups and cohort models. At the City University of New York, we today being International Day of the Women, I woke up to a tweet about our Women in Technology New York initiative that is trying to draw more women students at CUNY into technology. And one of our women was today on the Today Show, getting to talk about how important it is to draw women in to technology. But she was able to do that partly because there was a cohort group that has been gathering strength and steam at CUNY and putting these women in positions to speak up and to get jobs and that sort of thing.
Anything else that folks want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just like to add that it also gets to be authentic, right? To ensure that you have a diverse team, it really gets to come from within that true desire to have a diverse team. And I think that sometimes we're limited by what we know. So it's important that if you find yourself not having a diverse team or not having all the people at the table or the voices at the table, to be able to get to a place where you're authentic about it, which would mean like trainings and being able to start seeing what you don't see or what you can't see.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. So I'm going to move to the next question. What do you think are the top barriers for women to get ahead in their careers now, and how can we as female leaders be a strong role model for them?
Okay, I'll take that one. So my background is I have an engineering degree, a master's, and I used to work for various Fortune 500 companies in an engineering role and moved on to business advisor and then changed careers completely into living my purpose. And so from that experience and also in working with women, I'm a life coach and a workshop facilitator, and a lot of the theme that comes up is, I'm not happy about my job. Right. I from being unhappy on the job and experiencing other women who are in executive positions who are miserable on the job. I think one of the struggles or the barriers is that sometimes as women, we don't recognize fully that we're worthy of the life of our dreams. And underneath that umbrella of the life of our dreams is a career that we're passionate about. And so what I find is that there are a lot of women in positions that are seeking to make it or be successful, but they're not passionate about it. And so when you're not passionate about it, then the real driver or the courage and confidence that it takes to move up in our careers isn't really there. And that's something that I've found both in my current career as a life coach, but also in my past career.
There's something Anita said earlier about being authentic, and that's something that's required of each of us when we're trying to reach our goals and when we're mentoring other women. One thing she said about being authentic is, when we're seeking diversity in other employees or potential employees, we have to be authentic about ourselves. We have to know what our own passion is and not really find ourselves trying to become what another person wants us to become, because that's not going to work for us in the long run. I mentored a young woman. I used to be on the alumni board of directors at the University of the Pacific, and that was my alma mater, or is my alma mater. There was a young woman that I was mentoring. She was on the debate team, and I spent a lot of time on the debate team in high school and college, and she was very unsure of herself because she wasn't winning all of the rounds that she was in. And I had to sit back and remember myself. I worked very hard and I eventually started winning, but just being on the debate team was enough. Not everyone is on the debate team. There are skills that you're gaining every day just by competing, researching, arguing, team building. All of those skills bring you to a place where you can be competitive in life, in your career, in family, Thanksgiving dinners. It could be a number of things. And so she's continuing on. She's doing better. She's finding her voice and she's beginning to win. But she really put a lot of blocks on her shoulders thinking that she wasn't competitive. And once she got rid of that, I think she really started to blossom. So we really have to look at who we want to be, what our goals are, and push for those.
So you remind me of a story. I mean, I think the barrier we're talking about here, and not to blame women, but the barrier is self-confidence or insecurity. I was at a stage in my career where I was considering what was the next job, and I was talking to a mentor who suggested you should apply for this job. And I said, well, but I read the job description, and I don't have this, and I don't have that, and I don't have this. And she said, yeah, but the men would read that job description with 8 things you have to have and say, I have 3 things. I'm a natural. And that is really a lens that, again, not to generalize, but I have felt. And I think there are a lot of women who still have an imposter syndrome, even when they're sitting in the job of their dreams, that, wait a minute, maybe any day now they're going to discover I didn't really belong here. And, we need to change those internal stories we tell ourselves. And you do this for a living.
I was going to say, I have to jump in here because as you both were talking, and you too, I was reminded of how many times during my life I've been told, Carolyn, that's impossible. And I don't know, I really do think that my parents must have dropped me on my head as a little kid, because to me, when someone said that's impossible, I thought, yeah, we'll see about that. But how many people, how many women, I mean, it's not just a woman thing, but how many people would just take that like, oh yeah, that's impossible. I shouldn't try. Oh, when I decided to leave my corporate leadership position and start a technology startup, I mean, even my own family said, Carolyn, that's impossible. First of all, you're not male. You're not a young, recently dropout of an Ivy League college. And you don't fit the picture of what a tech startup CEO looks like. I'm like, yeah, we'll see about that. But really, I mean, doing that and being an example is one thing that we can do to help promote the idea that, it's not, when someone says that's impossible, that's just a starting point. That's just motivation.
That's right. Agreed. To what degree is your current role a spot you aspired to or envisioned as you started out? And to what degree was it totally unexpected?
So I'll start with that one. So I went to an Ivy League college and Harvard Business School, and I planned from day one that I would work full time. I would climb to positions of more and more power and responsibility, and I would run something someday. And largely that has come true, except for one big, gigantic change. For the first 20 years, I was doing that in the private sector, and all of a sudden, I switched over to be in education policy. So I went from the company called Dun & Bradstreet, D&B now, to work for the superintendent of the New York City public school system. And I got inspired to do that because during my private sector life, I had gotten involved on the New York City board of Teach for America. And that was my hobby, was to promote educational equity. And then I switched my hobby for my day job. And my day job for the last 15 some odd years has been in education, where, running something is a little different. I don't know that I run something right now, but I have a lot of influence over how CUNY educates 275,000 degree-seeking students every year. So that was a very different switch.
Well, I have a spoiler alert. I already told you that I was in speech and debate in high school and college, but that's not what I intended to work into a final career or the career that I'm at right now. I went to law school and I wanted to be a lawyer. My mom was an educator and she wanted me to be a teacher when I was growing up, and I looked at her and I said, but you have so much homework. I don't want to do that. I want to be a lawyer instead. Like, that doesn't have a whole lot of homework. And so I went to law school, and somehow this career just dropped in my lap. I had spent most of my career working in the Capitol building, just working so that I can become a lawyer. But I found a bug. I was really happy and excited with what I was doing, all along realizing that any advocacy work was exactly what I was doing in speech and debate when I was growing up. So that's not exactly what I intended to do. I never thought, I want to be a lobbyist. It's very difficult work, and yeah, I have more homework than anybody I know, but it turned out that it all worked out well, and I'm very pleased with what I'm doing. So
That's fabulous. So tying a little bit to the very first question where we're talking about how to promote diversity within the workplace, what strategies do you guys think work well to promote inclusion in the workplace itself, in the building, if you will? As a leader, how do you stay mindful of really who's at the table and who's missing at the table? Carolyn?
So I could take or start this one off. So when we developed the product for Humaxa, we very intentionally made it so employees could give feedback on a whole number of different topics, but one very important was diversity and inclusion, and that is absolutely by design. So just to back up a couple of steps, the software itself uses this fun interactive chatbot that finds out how people feel about work. Do you have an opportunity to grow professionally? Do you feel like you're paid fairly? Do you feel like you have a chance to give back to others? Do you feel that your organization takes specific steps to make sure that people who are of very diverse backgrounds feel included? And based on what people say through that chatbot, it will then make recommendations. If they're saying, well, Carolyn, yeah, we do a pretty good job, but I feel like we could do even more. Oh, gosh, have you thought about nominating someone from a diverse background to be Person of the Week, which our software will then go and do for you? Or have you thought about getting together with your colleagues and discussing multicultural awareness? Gosh, I haven't tried that. Yeah, I'd be interested in that. And the software will go out and find out who else is interested and get everybody together and kind of not just gather feedback, but get people involved in making the workplace community even better than it already is. So we basically took that bull by the horns and just, took it for all it's worth because we feel it's so important. It's so critical to do.
Yeah. Other thoughts on the panel? Who or what moment, either big or small, made you believe that you're not only belonged, but you can achieve great success like you have? How has that impacted you, and what can you share to inspire everyone in the room? I know we've heard a little bit about Caroline. You guys have all told us and shared some stories, But what are some inspiring elements that you can share with the audience?
Okay. So I remember the exact moment. I was at in an engineering advisor position, and I kept bumping heads with my director. Every time she and I got in a room, just like, I'm like, I don't consider myself a mean person or a person that gets easily flustered. I don't understand why this is, she and I can't get along. And it continued to happen for a while. And what was happening in the particular department was people were so unhappy with how she treated them that they were starting to leave the department little by little. And this was supposed to be the department that everybody wanted to be in because it was brand new and it was exciting and breakthrough. And I started noticing this, and I would come home and talk to my boyfriend then, who was now my husband, and he was like, enough already, either do something about her or not. And I'm like, well, she's two levels above me and all the red tape, this, that, and the other. And one day I got an email, and it said that she was going on a 2-week break, like a health break or something. And I said, well, this is my chance. And I called her up. I went to a conference and called her up. And I said, hey, and when you have like a whole thing planned on what you're going to say, and this is everything. And what came out of my mouth was, hey, I want to be your friend. And I was like, my kindergarten self just came out right there. And then I hear silence. And then I started to hear sobbing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm fired. Like, I just made the director cry. And I let her cry. I was like, hey, are you okay? And she said, I was literally just in the room with my mother saying I have no friends. And at this point, I had been highlighting between living my purpose of empowering people to love themselves and this corporate job. And out of that moment, we became friends. We went to dinner. And she's kind of started on her own path because somebody stood up for her. Somebody said, I see you, you matter. And that whole department transformed into a department where everybody was trying to hire in. People were hearing about it outside of the company. And that was when I really recognized my power, when I stand in my purpose. So
I've got chill bumps just hearing the story, really. That's amazing. Others?
I had a 7th grade teacher who was teaching us, I think it was personal development. You know that class that's real awkward when we're in middle school. And it was at that time that the King Tut exhibit had made its release in San Francisco. Now I just told my age, but anyway, I was so interested in this King Tut exhibit that I told the teacher, his name was Mr. Grotemeyer, he's my favorite teacher of all time. I told him I wanted to share what I'm learning with the class. He said, okay, that's fine. Bring in whatever you want to bring in. And it must have been every week for about a quarter or a semester. I know it wasn't the whole year. I would have the little it wasn't a PowerPoint then. What was the little thing? The projector? Yeah. And I'd have the little transparencies. I did all of that. Remember, my mom was a teacher. But I was able to present all of this, and it just made me feel wonderful that I could capture the students and share with them what I thought. And little do you know, he eventually, in 8th grade, had us do an impromptu debate, right? So you see the theme here, but he really listened to us, not just myself. I had a best friend named Sally, and he let her do the same thing on things that she was interested in, about her family. And so we all had moments, and he just opened it up and gave us the freedom to express ourselves in that age and time when it's so difficult. And I continued to communicate with him when I got older, and when I got into law school, and when I graduated, I called him, and he cried like a baby on the phone. It was just amazing. But thank you, Mr. Grotemeyer. But that was a moment for me, and that inspired me to go on and do things. But he was remarkable for just hearing the voice of 7th and 8th grade students at such a difficult time in our lives.
So in case you guys ever think that what we do in the marketplace is not important, this is what we do. We support teachers that make these incredible moments happen. That's the reason I'm here, is because of what Pamela was talking about. So we're going to take some questions from the audience. If you have a question for one of our panelists, you can raise your hand and we will get a mic to you. I don't see any hands yet. All right, I'm going to let you guys think about it. Oh, I got one. Sure. So the question is, everybody can hear it on the phone as well, biggest challenges you guys have had in your career to overcome. Ania?
To finish up that story I was telling about my director, we ended up literally leaving corporate America arm in arm on the same day. And at the time, my husband was living in Missouri because he was going to take on a full-time position as I go into entrepreneurship and live my purpose. And so, we're all excited, and I have this 90-day plan. I'm going to write my book and finish it by this point. I'm going to do this. Retreats and workshops are going to be launched. And I moved to Missouri finally, and 2 weeks after I'm there, I find out I'm pregnant. Gone goes the 90-day plan. I just could not keep up with what I wanted to do. And it was a struggle. Financially, it was a struggle. I had properties I had purchased in Florida. Both renters moved out at the same time. And so those mortgages were my responsibility. And what I really, really learned in that moment is I've never looked back at the income that I used to bring in, because it's way more than what I bring in now. But I never once looked back. I realized that I wake up every day passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I know this is what I was born to do. And I was able to, every book, I have 2 books. Every edit of major book, I had a baby. So I always joke that I have 5 babies, because I had 2 babies, and then in between I had one of the books, and then after the 3rd baby, I launched my second book. So just that kind of everything falling into place, and really actually being able to prioritize my children through it all was pretty miraculous, and really grateful for that to this day.
So I'm going to build on that around the whole theme of work and family balance, because I think that is the challenge that probably everyone in this room is facing, not just the women. And nowadays, I have a standard piece of advice that I give to young women who ask me, how did you do it? You raised 2 kids who are in pretty great shape, and your husband worked and he's got a crazy schedule too. How did you do it through all those years? And I say that the key in terms of whether your kids are going to be okay with your decision to work or your decision not to work is you have to be comfortable with your own choice. So I can look at my peers and their kids, and any woman who was fully comfortable and confident in their choice of either working full-time or choosing some other path. If they were comfortable in that, their kids are fine. Their kids who they stayed home with are fine. Their kids who had nannies and, daycare are fine. It's when the parents are deeply conflicted about their choices that the kids get really, really conflicted. And someday someone will do a real study of this, but I will put money now on this theory that if you can make the choice, you talk about following your passion, just if you can make the choice that's right for you, your kids will be fine. And, my kids now say this to their friends, so.
That's great advice. So remember that conflict can lead to conflict. Pamela, do you want to share anything?
I was just
go
going
ahead,
to say, we live today in the culture that we inherited. We didn't, none of us here got to start with a blank slate, right? So it wasn't all that long ago that, it was just expected. Women stayed home, men went to work, and that's just how it is. And, so I think things are changing, and I think they're changing for the better. I was just talking with a young woman, I think it was last week, and she said, Carolyn, every time I spend time with my friends that are just moms, which is very honorable, they look at me like, you should be a mom as if you don't work. And then when I go to work and I hang out with my work friends, especially the ones who aren't moms, they look at me like, you should work as if you're not a mom. And, you get this conflicted thing. And I really do think this is something that we've inherited from from a cultural standpoint. And anything that we can do to just educate people and figure out, what are the things that we can do to support these people who are feeling conflicted. We talk about conflict and how that, gets then brought down to the next generation as well. Things like, gosh, do we give our people a chance to go pick up their kids from school if they need to, and then maybe go work later at night if that works better for their schedule, things like that. I think we're making great progress there. And we just need to continue to figure out how can we make these people feel, us, how can we make ourselves feel not so conflicted with the culture that we've inherited.
Yeah, I think that's true. I guess I was thinking about another panel that Amy and I were on a couple weeks ago. We talked about the whole child. I think we have to think about the whole person, right? We're not just a employee, and we're not just a mom or just a dad. We are a whole person, and we have to consider that. Any other questions? Oh, I got one. Dawn?
Question, any tips for pretty much anyone in the room as to how to better develop yourself or a better network to get the board position that you want or the leadership position that you want?
So I'll repeat the question just for, again, the whole audience. Any tips or advice of how to get the board seat or the position that you're desiring to have?
So one piece of advice from my own background would be specifically cultivate a variety of skills and experiences in your jobs from the beginning. So I started my professional career at American Express in marketing and made sure that I got operations experience along that way. And then when American Express, 11 years later, I thought, gee, if I don't change industries now, I'm going to die as a credit card marketer. And that's going to be kind of narrow. So I consciously cultivated moving into more of a tech direction. We called it tech then. It was the phone company. But, the internet was coming to NYNEX, and I was a competitive marketer at American Express. NYNEX was about to have all the game changed, and they were going to have to be competitive marketers too. So I figured I'd take my competitive marketing and I'd go into something that looked like tech. And that sort of constant adding of variety led me to a point where I had this private sector background in product development, marketing, and general management, and this other 20-year career in education policy. And I met Hardeep, who said, would you join our board? But it was this very unusual combination of backgrounds that I was trying to add that helped me in that case.
And I would also add, don't say no to opportunities that come your way. A lot of times we're overwhelmed. We think we're doing so much right now, which we are, but then there's an opportunity to volunteer for something. And that expands your horizon, to build off of what she was saying. It just builds your network and your opportunities to be exposed to other people who would then look at you as a potential candidate for some of these positions.
I would say at Humaxa, one of the things that, again, our product is designed to do is to get people to interact who normally wouldn't. Maybe someone in senior leadership who's willing to mentor somebody who's maybe just starting out in their career, but you don't have to have that. You don't have to have software that helps facilitate that. It just makes it easier. People can take the initiative to just go find. I mean, they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would argue it's both, but certainly who you know is a great game changer for somebody who's trying to move, not just up, but I think what you were referring to laterally too. I think people need to be, not afraid to, take a lateral move just to get experience in different areas that you might not have even thought about, that just opens your perspective so much more than it would have otherwise. It can really help.
Just one thought on networking, and I'm going to get this a little bit wrong, but there's some new research out about where in your professional network you're actually more likely to get the next boost or advantage from. So and I'm forgetting the term the researcher uses, but your closest in network, your immediate family and closest friends, are not the place where you're probably going to get the professional boost. It's this extended network, your LinkedIn people that you don't see every day. And when I look back on my career, some of the people who've given me opened the next door are someone I went to high school with, who actually introduced me to the headhunter, who introduced me to Hardeep, right? And who knew? The lesson in that is to cultivate your garden of relationships and be in touch with people that are a little farther away, and also to pay it forward. So remember that this person you met in high school or in your first job could actually become, a very important door opener for you some other time. But be that person for someone else also. Be that farther out connection who then opens a door and helps people get ahead.
I'm going to take one question online because we got a lot of folks online too, and then I'll catch you, Victoria. So this is a good one. How do we move from having a diversity and inclusion program to having a culture of diversity? So it's a big one. Carolyn, I'm going to probably put you on the spot a little bit because, I think it is, we have an inclusion and diversity program here at Power School, and I think, we're moving in that direction, but you talked a little bit about the intentionality and some of the, how you approach that. Maybe you could expand on that.
Sure. So I think, and this is more just my opinion, but I think sometimes we just get so focused on day-to-day operations that sometimes we just need a little nudge or a little reminder of, gosh, we've got these open. So one of the responses that our system will make is, gosh, if you feel like we could be doing a better job of building this diverse and inclusive culture, have you thought about all the open positions that we have here at this organization? How about thinking through somebody that that maybe isn't represented as much as they could be and recommending them for one of those open positions? Something along those lines, just to get more people thinking about it. And I know at one of the organizations I worked at, not Humaxa, but we would sit down and figure out very intentionally, gosh, if we could really just figure out what jobs we have open that would fit really well with someone who is maybe visually impaired, who needs a door that's open for them, they would probably work out even better perhaps than somebody who didn't have that. We would very specifically sit down and just make it intentional. Mm-hmm. And when one person starts doing it, then maybe two people start doing it, and then maybe four people start doing that. And it really can just build kind of like a snowball into a cultural change that happens gradually.
I'd like to add to that. I think another piece is communication, and communication in that landing a message such that the other person gets it, right? I could be speaking Chinese and it would be totally understood by me, but whoever I'm talking to, if they don't speak Chinese, then they're not going to get it. And one of the things that, from my experience, I went to Redding County to do a 8-hour workshop kind of to support nurses and therapists and counselors. They were seeing that a lot of the women who were from a DV, domestic violence background, they were seeing a lot of recidivism, and they're like, "Why? I don't understand why I can't reach them. My clients come in, they won't share, and they're of all different cultures and backgrounds, and they just won't share with me. They won't open up." And a lot of the work that I do is experiential. So while it was part clinical, the workshop the training that I was doing, there was also some experiential pieces where I was asking people to dive deep into like forgiveness work or self-love work, and a lot of them were sitting there like this. And they were closed and closed and closed. And then I said to them, I said, you're asking people to come into your office having not met you, and you're asking them to open up and tell you these deep things about their life. and yet we're in a safe space and your arms are closed and you're not willing. So I just want you to be with that. And as that, I have to keep saying it a couple times, but people opened up, and to this day, I get from Reading that was their most powerful training that they had. So I think it's also about understanding your communication and really understanding who are you trying to reach, and are you reaching them with your communication is really important.
So I don't know everything about the culture of inclusion and diversity here at Power School, but I do know that, sorry, why am I crying? I've never been in an organization that would get this many men in the room on International Women's Day.
Well put. Very well put. I agree. I think there's a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot of commitment to diversity at Power School. So, and that comes from a lot of good leadership. So, Victoria, you had a question.
Yeah, I was partially around personal growth. You all have had career paths that you saw you had a path that you wanted to reach, whether it's a new position or maybe it's an idea that you wanted to pitch. Had those ideas or that path ever that you wanted to go to ever get rejected? And how did you handle rejection? And what steps did you take to get past that and maybe take a different path, or split the road, or however you may have handled it to continue to reach your goal or get your idea?
So I'll just summarize quickly. No, I'm going to summarize. Yeah, it's basically when
Every
you're reaching
day.
for the gold, when you were not saying it's impossible, and then sometimes you get rejected or you have blockers that you cannot continue. How did you navigate that?
As a speaker and someone who does workshops and is really trying to get self-love, people to recognize that self-love is equally as important as housing and clothing people, I get rejected on a daily basis. It is part of my life. And I really, again, I kind of circle back to passion, just extremely being passionate about what is my mission and what am I here to do, and recognizing that rejection is just a gateway to my next opportunity.
I can tell a very short story about this one because it was very powerful at the time, and it's almost visceral even today. So a while back, I was fortunate enough to get an introduction to someone who's let's call him a Silicon Valley bigwig. It was the kind of meeting that you hope for, and I can remember being very excited about it. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get to meet this person one-on-one. I'm really nervous and doing my homework and all this. And I was pitching the idea for Humaxa. And within 20 seconds of speaking with this gentleman for the first time, he said, "Stop, Carolyn, stop. That idea is stupid." And he actually used profanity. I will not repeat what he said, but it was something stupid. And he said it about 10 times. And I had never in my professional career ever had somebody speak like that to me so abruptly when I didn't even know the person. And I was shocked. I was truly shocked. So much so that, the conversation and then to his credit, he kind of was trying to explain himself and sort of back up from all that. But it was one of the most awkward conversations I've ever had. And he gave a whole bunch of feedback also. But it was so hard for me to get past this sort of initial reaction of just, my gosh, Carolyn, I've never heard of anything so stupid, that it took me 2 or 3 days just to process that. And to try to go back and figure out, okay, what was the series of events that led up to this, and how am I going to somehow turn this into a positive experience, pick out these little bits and pieces of what he said to try to improve, and then never talk to that person again. So I don't know if that was the best way to handle it, but that's how I handled it.
So another question from the chat pane. If you could go back and give your younger self a as a professional, one piece of advice, something you wish you could have known about being a successful woman personally or professionally, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, you heard me mention the young woman that I mentored. All the things that I was telling her were things that I wanted to tell my 13-year-old self. You're good enough. You're amazing. You're doing something remarkable. And at the same time, I say to myself today, you have to be humble. You have to be humble in this life in order to achieve and get to where you need to go, because you don't know everything. You're going to have to rely on other people. But if I were to tell that young 13-year-old Pam that, I think it would have made a difference. I don't think I would have changed my course. I think it would have made my course a little bit easier. It would have helped me handle those failures, which there were many, and it would have been easier for me. But just to say that back then, just to look back now, I saw the face on the young woman that I was mentoring. And it wasn't just the one thing that I told her that I shared with you. It was a lot of things. And we had a wonderful, long conversation. I could see it on her face that there was an exhale. And she realized, yeah, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is great. I'm here, and I should make the most of this. So that's what I would say to my younger self, and to all of our younger selves.
So for me, the first, last, and most important piece of advice I would give, or wish I had been given, is, follow a great leader. There have been times I was lucky that my very first professional job after business school, I had an amazing female boss who was also a fantastic leader. And later, I took some jobs because I wanted the job. I wanted to do that work. I wanted to be in this product line or this company or this organization. And I'm great and strong and I can do a lot of stuff. And it doesn't matter that the person who runs that organization is sort of adult or sort of a dork or sort of, whatever. It always matters. And, just follow the great leaders and avoid, like the plague, leaders that are weak or indecisive or intolerant or any of the bad things you can think of, because you will not be able to thrive if you're there, and you should be anywhere else.
I would tell myself that you have everything right there within you to live the life of your dreams, and that it's a matter of you accessing it. And when you get stuck, don't be afraid to seek support.
Did any other comments? I'm going to jump in with one comment for myself. I think one of the things that we talk a lot about role models and knowing your role models. I think one of the things that I wish I had known earlier in my career was that you don't have to have certain particular personality traits or to be a certain way to be a highly successful leader. I'll give you one example. A lot of very successful leaders are very extroverts. They're very charismatic. And I'm not that. So, you have to, don't limit yourself by just what you see in your leadership, whether it's male or female or certain pieces. There's really nothing that can stop you. It's really your own mindset that will stop you.
You've been trying to ask a question for a while.
Joe. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry, Joe.
So I look for fire in the eye. That's what I look for. If I see that in someone coming to me and they're charged up about whatever it is they're asking me about that they want to do, they have that fire in the eye and you know it when you see it, then I will take time and invest in that person. And I have made plenty of hiring decisions because I didn't see the fire in the eye. So that's my simple answer to that question.
I know many of you have heard that saying, luck equals hard, what is it? Luck equals opportunity, where opportunity meets hard work or something like that.
Yes.
Anyway, that's kind of, does someone have it? Preparation equals hard work. So thank you very much. So what I look for really is someone who's working hard. I mean, we talk about all of these things and sometimes the things we're mentioning today may sound like platitudes, but hard work had to go into a lot of this. And there's no substitute for hard work. And once you put that in, then all of the other opportunities come into play. But that's what I look for is on a resume, someone who's worked really hard, someone who's done extracurricular activities or mentoring, volunteering, all of those things are things that I look for in bringing on staff.
Oh, so I'm conflicted. Like there's so many great questions in the panel. Let me take a question from the panel, from the chat pane really quick. Our culture tends to enforce boys to get out there and try things and for girls to be careful and not make mistakes. And this carries through into adulthood. So I see ladies who are capable but not willing to try due to fear of failure. What advice would you give to those ladies to overcome this?
So I'm going to answer that a different way, which goes back to the how can you be a mentor or a role model.
Mm-hmm.
I think pushing people of men and women to be out of your comfort zone with your next project, your next job. One mentor once told me, when your arms are stretched way out like this and you see control of the situation just beyond your fingertips, you're in a great place. And that's the kind of way you need to work. And so that's another kind of mentoring advice that I give to people. You've got to be a little uncomfortable. Control has to be just a little bit beyond your fingers, and then you will be growing.
I'd like to add to that. I always tell people who are afraid of failure, I've seen people paralyzed to set goals because they might not make it. And I tell people to, and myself also, to not focus so much on the results, but to focus on the journey to getting there. And when you're out there, out on the skinny branches and you're beyond your comfort zone, I always say that's where the magic happens. So you might as well go for the magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would just like to throw in practice being uncomfortable. Practice all those things, because so much of what prevents us from doing something that we really should be doing is up here.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll tell people, okay, so what's one of your biggest fears? Oh, Carolyn, I really don't like public speaking. I'm like, okay, so let's start small. We're going to get in this huge room, pretend there's all these people in here. Go stand at the front of the room. Don't say anything. Just stand there. And they'll stand there. And they'll stand there. They're like, can I go sit down? No, stay there. Practice getting super uncomfortable when it doesn't really matter that much. Then when you're up in front of a bunch of people in a room and there actually are people there and you're used to this really uncomfortable position of just standing in front of people for a whole lot and just imagining there are all these people out there, it'll feel like just rolling out of bed in the morning. It'll go so much better.
That's great advice. Really great advice. Right here, Paige.
Okay, awesome. As a young woman in a male-dominated industry, I think that sexism hides in the shadows in forms of microaggressions, things like being spoken over or going to a different teammate for an answer because he's male, whatever it may be. I think that it's one of those things that really has an effect on our confidence level. What would you, or what advice would you have for young women and young professionals who are combating that and trying to walk the fine line between being passionate and being emotional?
I'm going to summarize really quick because I get pinged. I get lots of chat pings when I don't repeat my question. So I'm going to try to summarize. So Paige's question is about in the workplace, sometimes there can be microaggressions or microaggression, sexism that's maybe unintentional, but it happens and that deflates individuals' confidence. How do you battle against that? Did I capture it pretty well? Yeah.
So I'm going to tell a story from the Obama White House. Now, I wasn't part of this story, but some of my friends were, because it does not just happen to young women in tech. Our President Obama had every possible credential around diversity and inclusion in the way he staffed his administration. But in the early days of his first White House staff, some of the women who were in very senior positions felt like when they were in meetings with the president, it was only the men that got to talk or only the men that got listened to. And so the women made a pact with each other that when one of them spoke in the next meeting, at least one other, if not two, were going to take that point and build on it, just to drive home the fact that this point had gotten made. And it both, as it's been written about since then, so I'm just reporting what I've read. It changed the dynamic. It also caused the president to say, "What's going on here?" And he had a separate meeting then with his women senior staff who said, "Hey, this is happening, and you've got to listen to the women in the room." And, nothing is ever perfect in White House dynamics or, cutthroat and rough and tumble. But I think the climate changed. And so what the parallel is for you, find another woman, there's got to be more than one, and bond together and just push back on and make your voices heard by doubling them or tripling them.
I think you can also explain how other people's actions make you feel. It's not a new technique. This is a really old technique, but I can remember one of my first tech jobs. I had a manager that would come in, and as I was speaking with other people in the room, I had a whiteboard in my office, and there were sticky notes with like a big flow chart all over it. He would look, and then he would move my sticky notes around so they weren't in order anymore. I think he thought it was funny. I don't know if this was a techie thing or what, but anyway, he thought it was funny. I didn't think it was very funny. And so he wasn't a bad guy. He was just completely unaware that these actions were not helpful and I'll say inappropriate. So I simply told him, gosh, when you do this, it makes me feel like it makes me feel nervous in front of these other people that I'm trying to make a good impression with. And he was like, "Oh, I thought we were bonding." I said, "No, we weren't bonding." But sometimes it's just awareness, and sometimes just, privately having a conversation with someone can make a difference. Maybe.
More questions in the audience? I see one back here.
For women who are at the pinnacle of their career, how do you decide what's next, whether that be professional or personal?
So for women at the pinnacle of their career, how do you define what's next? Or what was the last one? Professionally or personally, yeah. Yeah. Once you're at the top, what do you do?
Does that ever happen?
Not there yet.
Still working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, maybe just to restate it is, we've been talking a lot about how you reach out and reach for that empowerment and that success zone. When you reach that success zone, how do you approach the next thing? Is it the same way? Is it different in terms of setting your goals for the next milestone in your career or personally?
Well, in my work, there's a challenge every year. So we get new legislative ideas or we have new issues that come up that we need to advocate for every year that either our board or my superintendent find are priorities. When you, I think it's interesting that you asked the question about how you approach it. There's always an opportunity to approach something a little bit differently. I have a network, if you will, of certain advocates that I work with, but sometimes it's helpful to go outside of the education network because education impacts everything. For example, we have homeless youth in the state and the country that we need to deal with. So when I'm talking with my cohort of just education lobbyists, I'm going to miss out on all of the folks who are at county, local level politics working on homelessness issues for youth. So I really have to kind of stretch myself to work with people in another area. So I think, you know, if we accomplish something one moment, there's always going to be something on the horizon that we want to do better, that we want to accomplish the next thing. So I think it's just natural being at this level, you're always going to have something new and you want to just take it on, do it differently and try to achieve those same goals.
So I think part of the answer for me, I have always tried to pick my next sort of arc by visualizing myself doing something that's, you know, 3 or 4 steps away, not necessarily hierarchical, but 3 or 4 steps away from where I am, visualizing, gee, I'd like to be there, I'd like to do that. That's a person who's doing something I'd like to do. And that helps me figure out the zigzags to get there. But what I've realized as I've gotten either a little older or I've reached, you know, more than one of these points where I then had to look around and find a new thing to visualize is I'm sort of redefining what top is, right? Mm-hmm. I would have defined top in Harvard Business School as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And I was on the global leadership team of a Fortune 1000 company. And I realized I didn't want the next rung in that particular ladder. And that's actually when I switched to education, where I woke up every morning with a much deeper commitment to the purpose of the organization than when we were selling credit reports to D&B. So you kind of redefine the top. It's one thing, and trying to visualize where I want to see myself, you know, kind of what is it that I want to be doing. And happiness and passion plays an increasing role in that with every year, right? I'm thinking maybe my next step is to take my puppy and make him a therapy dog, and that's what I'm going to do. So that's my current mind picture.
And if I could jump in really quick, and maybe this is a little bit morbid, but I always try to picture at the end of my life, if I'm looking back at where I am today, what is the thing that I cannot not do? What am I going to look back and say, I wish I had done something differently? And having that even just like a litmus test of kind of testing out what the different next step might be, that's helped me. I don't know if it will help everyone, but it certainly helped me.
Alan.
From those points in a world where it's always not enough. We are not good enough, we don't have enough sales, numbers, whatever it is. We've got to do more. How do you balance that? Where you say it is enough. Final business is human well-being, and for us also, it's our own growth. Where do we say it's good enough? How do we balance that? Where do we draw the line? Or we keep on hungering for more and more and more and more, and our hamster on that wheel?
So the question is around in a culture, in a world where it's pursuit, more sales, more of everything, how do we balance out? How do we get in a happy place with when the world continues to push to the next thing? Did I capture that right?
So I'm not sure I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to make an observation that when I was speaking earlier this morning about school districts, I think you asked me the question about when do we avoid putting mental health pressure on our high-performing, kids? So there's clearly a theme here about high-performing pressure. And I guess in my case, I would just urge you all to get older because, it really gets a lot easier to be comfortable. I mean, and I come from a position of I have incredible privilege right now and every opportunity and asset to do anything I want. So starting from that point, which not everyone can be at, but it's really very easy to redefine success, to be taking your therapy dog to, schools and hospitals. It's very easy.
So unfortunately, we are a little bit over time, so I'm going to have to close the panel out. But I want to thank you all for being here. You guys were fantastic, fantastic advice, fantastic questions from everybody in the audience. So thank you.
If we could just say thanks for the men for coming too. We really appreciate your support. It's fantastic.
Thank you.